Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units I looked at off the wide this week. The first one, the New Orleans Saints out there. Right now, it's New Orleans in 67% of fantasy leagues. And I know Week 8's game with the Chargers, they didn't do much, but this is a one-week streaming option only. The Carolina Panthers give up the 8th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And this Panther team, they just can't do anything on the year 1-7. Week 6 versus Tampa Bay, 45 points allowed, a sack, 3 interceptions, a punt return touchdown. Week 7 versus Denver, 27 points allowed, a fumble recovery. In Week 8 at the Chargers, 26 points allowed, 3 sacks, and a safety. So like I said, their defense has struggled mightily over the last few weeks, where at the beginning of the year they got off to a good start, but it's a one-week use only. And going back to Week 1 versus Panther team, they had a big game, 10 points allowed, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. So something along those lines wouldn't be far-fetched. In my opinion, the next DST is another one-week streaming use is the Cincinnati Bengals. So this Bengal DST, they've been torched for the majority of the season. I know they had a couple decent games in Week 6 at the Giants, 7 points allowed, 2 sacks, and interception. Week 7 at Cleveland, 14 points allowed, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, a return touchdown. But Week 8 got the doors blown off by Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, 37 points allowed in that one. But this week, a great matchup versus the Raiders, give up the second most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And like I said, Cincinnati is a one-week use only DST, I think, versus Raider offense that's down to Gardner Minshew once again at quarterback, and not much going besides Brock Bowers and Myers on the offense. Could be a defense that can help fantasy owners this week. The next DST, the Washington Commanders. The Commanders defense, I believe, has gotten better over the last few weeks, where Dan Quinn was a great defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, and now he's translated over here with the Commanders on their defense. So a great matchup at the New York Giants. Most fantasy points they give up to DSTs on the season. In the last few weeks for this defense, Week 6 at Baltimore, 30 points allowed, 2 sacks, and INT. Week 7 versus the Panthers, 7 points allowed, 2 sacks, a pick 6, 2 interceptions in that one. And Week 8 versus Chicago, they held a good offense down, 15 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. So this week with a good matchup at the New York Giants. And out there in 88% of fantasy leagues, they're definitely a great ad this week, is the Commanders, is a streaming option for sure. The next DST, the New England Patriots. So what a victory it was for New England, coming from behind and beating the New York Jets. And they're a one-week streaming option as well, with a great matchup with the Tennessee Titans that give up the most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So like I said, New England, they haven't done much all season defensively, but as a streaming option, I think they could go out there, get pressure on Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, whoever's the quarterback going to be this week. And this Patriot team, they know they got to rely on the defense more if Drake May is going to miss this ball game with a concussion. So right now, out there in 95% of fantasy leagues, and their streaming option in the 5th and final defense DST, I looked at off the wire, staying in the same games as the Tennessee Titans. So this week, their streaming option, I know they got the doors blown off the last couple weeks. Week 7 at Buffalo, 34 points allowed. And then Week 8 at Detroit, they got the doors blown off, 52 points allowed, 4 sacks. So Week 9, a good matchup versus the Patriots. Give up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. If Drake May is going to miss this game, we know Jacoby Brissett's more of a game manager, not much of a passer down the field, even though they drove down in the last 2 minutes of that game and scored a touchdown to beat the New York Jets, was this Tennessee Titan team. So right now, if you need a streaming option defense, the Tennessee Titans are out there in 98% of fantasy leagues. That's a few defense DST units I looked at off the wire for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.